Let's move to this conversation. Western Cape Police have reportedly opened an inquiry into the sexual assaults allegations levelled against suspended Community Safety MEC Albert Fritz. News 24 reports that police are still waiting for some documents, which include statements by the alleged victims. So there's also no criminal case that has been opened against Fritz just as yet. But questions have been raised also about how this matter was handled by those in charge. Let's speak now to Reverend Bafana Khumalo, who's a co-founder of Sonke Gender Justice. Thank you so much for your time, Bab Khumalo, this evening. Let's just start with, this week we saw the reports suggesting that some senior DA leaders in the Western Cape turned a blind eye on these allegations for months, this article alleges, before acting on this matter around Mr. Fritz. Now, this, looking at it at face value, is simply an indictment on the party's handling of this matter.
Yes, it is indeed an indictment, but this is not something new. We see this a lot in institutions, whether in the public sector or in the private sector, where organizations try to keep this under wraps. In many instances, try to persuade survivors of sexual assault to find alternative ways of resolving this, which is a problem.
And when, one of the things that surprises me, and I'm going to get into the details of what you've just said about, other spheres and how this is being dealt with. But when you read this article, it supposes that J.P. Smith admitted to being approached by one of the alleged victims, but referred her to Premier Alan Winde as well as party processes, while another source says David Abrahams apparently knew about these complaints since August 2021. When you look at such allegations, they should have really referred these women to the police, because we're even seeing this afternoon that there's still not even statements that have been filed with the police.
Well, there are two processes in terms of the Labour Relations Act with regards to these matters, Bongiwe. First, as employers, we are obligated to create a conducive environment for all the employees in an institution. So it has to be reported internally, yes, and that is important. The question is whether employers in that instance, when they receive this report, did they act promptly to take steps in terms of suspending the alleged perpetrator and putting an investigation model in place immediately. Because failure to do this, in fact, creates an unfair condition for those who are reporting. Particularly in this instance, we are talking about intents, and the power relations are skewed in this instance. So there is a lot that I think the leadership in the Western Cape needs to answer for. In terms of how they manage this. And then there's a second level of, ensuring that you advise the alleged victims to take this to the police for a criminal investigation. We are not sure whether they were given that advice, whether the people to whom this was reported also ensured that this matter is taken to the police. And so there are violations in this instance, because it means they've soft-pedaled in dealing with this matter, in ensuring that justice is seen to be acting in this instance.
I'm going to get to this internal process and what it means for the police process in just a moment, but I want to tell you on something that you've just said, because this, no doubt, as you say, is unfair on the alleged victims. I wonder, what does it do then to their psyche? Because from what you're explaining and the environment that you are then faced with as a woman once you've made these allegations may not necessarily be a conducive one for work, which may then, put you in the spotlight and really lead to secondary victimization, possibly.
It is very traumatic. I can imagine if you have to see your perpetrator almost on a daily basis, and you know what this person has done, you have reported, nothing has been done, it really is very problematic, because in fact, in terms of law, it means those who receive the report and have done nothing are themselves now implicated in not having taken the necessary steps in attending to this matter. And so we're not now just talking about the perpetrator, but we are talking about the system that has also not acted swiftly to ensure that these complaints are taken very seriously and a conducive environment is created, for these alleged victims so that they can function properly. If they have to deal with somebody who is so powerful, in the workspace, you can imagine what this does to these women. It means re-traumatization almost on a daily basis as they see this person, not being touched in any way. I think the problem, Bongiwe, is that in many institutions, people hope this can go away, which unfortunately is unfair on the people that are facing this victimization. So it means they continuously are exposed to perpetual victimization.
So it sounds like it's more of putting the institution first, ahead of what the alleged victim is telling you. And if we are to turn the situation around and really just nip this in the bud and deal with it, surely there should also be a calling out of some in these organizations who are enabling this to continue. In fact, I'm talking about the putting of the organization first versus the interest of the person coming to you to tell you about what may have happened to them.
I'm hoping that, I'm glad that they've appointed a very, committed advocate whom we know very well from the Women's Legal Center. I'm sure she will leave no stone unturned in this instance, so that all those in this value chain of the leadership in the Western Cape that failed must also be held accountable. Because as I say now, we are no longer talking just about the person that is alleged to have committed this act, but those who aided and abetted him by not ensuring that there is prompt justice to stop this kind of behavior.
Does this also speak to, not really taking the plight of women seriously when they raise these issues, and also at the same time, as we talk about the protection of the image of whatever organization comes under fire at the time, and in this case being the DA, seemingly not taking the victim's plight seriously, and thus could be accused by even some gender activists of possibly using this as a weapon even internally, because you talk about party processes and not necessarily talking about putting these victims through even a counseling process?
Well, Bongiwa, as we all know, there's been other cases that we have had within this party and in other parties. And the manner in which generally, parties respond to this issue leaves much to be desired. But this is the challenge that we have in South Africa, because this is not also isolated. It's generally the response, as I was saying in my opening remark, in the in the private sector as well. We see people finding all sorts of mechanisms to try and frustrate those that come forward and report these kinds of cases. So we do need to really look at our situation much more seriously to say, how do we hold people accountable? There is the new convention, which I'm happy that our country has signed up to, Convention 190 by the International Labour Organization, which provides very holistic guidance on how to deal effectively with issues like this of sexual harassment in the workplace. And I would hope that many employers take that convention to heart and use its provisions, because we will not see some of these lapses which unfortunately incentivize perpetrators to say you can do this and get away with it.
Mtungwa, as a final question, there's also another video that we saw circulating on social media of an MMC in the Amatole district being dragged, by men. The most disturbing part of this video is that someone who calls themselves a head of security is a woman who was walking behind these men as they are dragging this MMC. This is also in and itself very problematic for the fight against gender-based violence, when we even see women themselves acting in this particular manner against their own.
Bongiwe, that was a horrible video. We have just issued a statement as Sonke Gender Justice on this as well. calling for accountability for all those that have perpetuated this violence against this woman. I mean, the fact that the head of security is a woman underscores the fact that patriarchy is very strong in this country. It does not show itself in terms of toxic masculinities, but it also co-opts some within, women sector who play the game according to the rules of patriarchy. How this councillor was dealt with really is a shame. If we treat our leaders in this way by government institutions without any form of, restraint, it really underscores why we are having these high levels of violence. Not only that, it will be ordinary people that face this, but if a councillor can be treated like this by a statutory institution, really it shows how low our country has sunk.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I hope that the next time we speak, you and I can talk about this convention, because when one goes through it, it really highlights the importance of how organizations, as you say, must deal with this and look at how things could be different if these recommendations and what this particular convention puts into practice, if they are put into practice, in fact, in various organizations, we could be seeing a completely different picture. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That was Reverend Bafana Khumalo. He's the co-founder of Sonke Gender Justice.